Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Waiting for things to load up. All right. So inshallah ta'ala tonight, we're going to look at a hadith that we can actually spend hours and hours talking about, but we'll try to make it as simple as possible and brief so that we don't lose the crowd, because this is a specific hadith that has some really deep shari'i applications, meanings, fiqhi rulings are derived from this. So it's very broad in meaning and application. And this is a hadith that is narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. It's also been narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, by Abdullah ibn Abbas, by Jabir ibn Abdullah, by our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, Ubadah ibn Samit, and a couple of other companions. So multiple Sahaba have narrated this hadith. It's been collected in quite a few books of hadith, like in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, the Sunan of Ibn Majah, by Al-Bayhaqi, in the Mustadrak of Al-Hakim, and a couple of other books of hadith. And the hadith is a Hasan hadith. It's a good hadith. And we know, just for general knowledge, I've mentioned this before, but just as a review, of course we have the top grade, which is the Sahih, the authentic hadith. Then below that, of course, we have the Hasan hadith, which is good. We take the rulings from it, we believe in them. If it's about our beliefs, whatever may be the case, our rulings, we take it. And then, of course, the lower grades, meaning da'if, weak, mawdu', fabricated, those are the hadith that, of course, we don't apply in our lives. So the hadith, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, it's a very short hadith, that la darara wa la dirar. There is no harming, darar, nor reciprocating harm, darar. So this is a very profound hadith, that you don't directly or indirectly cause any kind of harm. This is an obligation upon a Muslim to live by. You don't directly harm anybody, nor do you indirectly harm anyone, or retaliate with harm, or whatever may be the case. And as I mentioned, this hadith is one of the most important principles in Sharia, in Islamic law, and also fiqh, which is jurisprudence. And Abu Sa'id radiallahu anhu, whose text that I'm using, this is the specific way it was narrated from Abu Sa'id. He was among the most knowledgeable of the companions. During the Battle of Uhud, he was only 13 years old. He wanted to fight in the Battle of Uhud, but the Prophet ﷺ rejected him because of the fact that he was only 13. But his father, he actually fought, Malik ibn Sinan al-Khudri. He fought and he was martyred in Uhud. But after the Battle of Uhud, Abu Sa'id radiallahu anhu, he participated in every single battle alongside the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now Abu Sa'id, he's among the most knowledgeable of the companions, and it shouldn't come as any surprise because, alhamdulillah, he has narrated over 1,100 ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And over 100 of them are found in just Bukhari and Muslim alone, and the others are spread out in the other collections of hadith. So this is a sahabi who, if he's narrated 1,100 hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, then definitely, of course, he was among the scholars of the companions. He had tremendous knowledge. So anyways, the hadith, as we said, that la darara wa la dirar, there is no harming nor reciprocating harm. We have the word, to the untrained eye, ear, sorry, it may sound as if it's the same, but it is. You can read it both ways. Darar, la darara wala darar, or dirar, but this is different. The first word, that la darar, and the second word is darar. Right? There's a ra, alif, ra. That's the second word. So before we get into the understanding of this hadith, we have to understand the difference between these two words. What is darar and what's darar? Right? Sounds very similar, but there's a difference in meaning. And the scholars throughout history, past and present, they've come up with 4 or 5 different definitions for these two words. The weakest of the opinions, which I'll just mention briefly and this, not spend too much time in it, because this is the weakest opinion about the definition. That it means the exact same thing. The Prophet ﷺ repeated it twice to emphasize to the Muslims that don't cause any harm. Right? This is the weakest definition. Then, of course, the other definitions which majority of the scholars have taken, that darar is the one who is to be harmed. That the one who is being harmed, let's say someone has caused you harm. You're supposed to patiently accept that harm. The moment you retaliate, that becomes darar. All right? Oh, we have another speaker. Just make sure the microphone on the back is off. So that is the difference between darar, you got harmed, and when you retaliate, justly, let's stay within the means of Islam, that you retaliated in a just manner. It's appropriate for you to retaliate, then it becomes darar. So we see a distinction in the definition. Also, some scholars, they said that darar is the kind of harm where one person gets benefit, but the other person suffers, right? But the word darar, absolutely neither party benefits. So darar is a harm that one person will benefit, the others will suffer. Darar is the type of harm that the doer, the taker, nobody benefits from. Well, both are losers, all right? The attacker and the attacked are both losers. Then another definition is that darar is A harms B. When B seeks revenge, that is now darar, right? And then the last one, that darar is A harming B, but darar is B harming A in an un-Islamic way. So when you take these 4 definitions into consideration, then it gives you a much, much broader understanding, and clearly there's a difference between the word darar and the word darar. Right? So this is what majority of the scholars have mentioned, that we take all 4 of these variant definitions and then we, inshallah ta'ala, apply it. So there's different examples. To understand this hadith, we have to give examples. Because as I said, this is a hadith that deals with Islamic law. So the best way to understand these type of intricate hadith is to give practical examples so the message and the understanding is clear to everybody. So let's say one example or one scenario is that actions that only bring harm to others. The one who is doing it, he's not being harmed. Right? So I do something. I'm not facing any harm. But those around me face that harm of my action. This is the first scenario. Such a person, this is an action that is considered evil in Islam. We're not supposed to go and harm people. This is one of the basic adab of a Muslim, right? You're not supposed to go around harming other people. So this is completely forbidden. One example that can be given, let's say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran regarding divorce, right? A lot of people don't want to talk about it, but just like how marriage has been properly explained in the Quran and the Sunnah, Divorce has also been properly explained in the Quran and Sunnah because it's part of life. Different people face this and they have to do it in the proper Islamic way. So Allah says in one ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah that وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَبَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ. When you have divorced the women, speaking to the men, right? The husband issues talaq on the wife. So when you have divorced the women and they fulfill the iddah, the appointed period, فَأَمْسِكُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ سَرِّحُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. Either you take them back bil ma'ruf, and everybody understands ma'ruf, with kindness, in a reasonable manner, with respect, or you completely free them with that respect, with that honor, and let them go. Because once you divorce, let's say you issue talaq first time, we know, you have the choice that within that period, you can take your wife back. Maybe you want to reconcile. You both talked about it, you understand it was mistaken, and you want to take her back, she wants to come back to you, no problem. But Allah gives a warning that when you take back your wife, you do it bil ma'ruf. If you cannot, then you let her go. Make the divorce completely final. وَلَا تُمْسِكُوهُنَّ ضِرَارًا لِتَعْتَدُوا. Do not take your wife back just to harm her more. Because many men, they have a twisted mind, right? Sometimes what happens, oh, you went and complained to the family, complained to the imam, went to the courts, and then he'll issue divorce, and then he's thinking, I'll show her, she just exposed me. Yeah, I'll take you back. And after taking her back, he doubles the torture that he used to do. And this is exactly what Allah is saying here, that وَلَا تُمْسِكُوهُنَّ ضِرَارًا لِتَعْتَدُوا. Do not take her back just to seek revenge and teach her a lesson. Right? وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ. Whoever does such an action, then he has done dhulm against his self, meaning he has fallen into sin. You're doing dhulm on yourself. وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا. And do not take the ayat of Allah as a mockery. These are the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So here even we see the word diraran. This is clearly found in this ayah. But the example here, the man is not being harmed, but he is causing harm to his wife. And this is, of course, an evil person, an evil action. So any type of action where you are causing harm to others, whether and you're enjoying it, whatever may be the case, this is, of course, completely prohibited in Islam. We don't go around harming other people. A second scenario is an action that it's beneficial to somebody, but it's harmful to another person. The case of divorce, it doesn't really benefit the man. Understand this, because he also goes through psychological problems. It's not easy, right? A lot of times, abusers don't understand that while you're in the process of abusing somebody, you're also losing out. You're not really finding peace inside. So the second scenario is that one person clearly benefits, but other people get harmed. This may be something permissible that the person is doing. He's benefiting from something halal. However, it's still harming someone else. And as a Muslim, he's supposed to refrain from it. It's completely halal. Let's give an example. Let's say in your backyard, you want to have a bonfire. It's completely halal in the Sharia to do that. However, you decide to do this on a very windy night. What's going to happen? Most likely the fire may spread and it may even burn your neighbor's house. Damage you enjoyed. It's completely permissible. There's nothing in Islam saying you can't have bonfires in your backyard or whatever may be the case, right? But if you're not thinking straight and you're doing it in a very windy night, there is the possibility that you may harm your neighbor's house. In Sharia, then it becomes forbidden for you. And if it ends up harming your neighbor's house, you are responsible to pay for the damages according to Sharia. Because you should have known better. You should have used your common sense that this is not the time to start a bonfire. It's dangerous even for myself. It can be, right? So this is one example. That it's a permissible action. You benefit from it, but by the qadr of Allah, it can cause harm to somebody else. As a Muslim, you refrain from it at that moment. So, keeping this balance in mind, what we should take into account that Islam respects everyone's personal property, everyone's personal space, and the freedom to use one's personal space as we wish according to Sharia, so long as it doesn't cause harm to other people. Like, for example, you live in an apartment complex. You want to drill some holes to, I don't know, put up your TV or something like that. That's completely allowed. It's your apartment complex. The lease says you can do it, this, that. But are you going to do it at 3 a.m. and disturb your neighbors? No, you won't. So then, as a Muslim, you are forbidden to do this permissible action at a specific time because it becomes harmful for your neighbors. It's your personal property. It's your personal space. However, you have to use your wisdom. Don't cause harm to other people, right? So, in Islamic law, one of the main goals of Islamic law is to bring about good for everybody and to prevent harm for everybody, right? This is one of the goals of Sharia. And this is one of the main hadith that is used to make up these rules. And of course, in an optimal case, whatever it is that somebody is doing, neither the owner of a property nor his neighbors, no one will be harmed. This is the best case, and we hope to always have that, but it's not always the case, right? So you have to make sure you take into consideration the interests of the general public, the interests of your neighbors, the interests of the community, and you do what is best based on that. Now, this is in terms of the first part of the hadith. La darar. This is clear. You don't go around causing harm in any way whatsoever, even if it's a halal action. But at certain specific times and places, a halal action may become harmful for other people. So you have to use your wisdom and know your limits and stay within the boundaries of Islam. Otherwise, you'll be sinning. You'll be annoying other people and so on and so forth. Now, the second part of the hadith, that la darar, this is the first part. Wala dirar. This is the second part. There is to be no reciprocating of harm. Right? This one is broader in scope. And the scholars from all the four madahib, Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, and Ahmed, rahimahumullah, and others after them of that caliber, such as Ibn Taymiyyah and others, they have talked about this part at length because a lot of rules are deduced from this part. The first part is easy to understand. As a Muslim, you cannot harm anybody. Very easy. We know this, right? Now, as far as the second part, the scholars have divided the understanding into a few points. First one, harm is to be prevented from appearing as much as possible. This is the first rule. Harm is supposed to be prevented as much as possible. If the harm has not yet appeared, whatever the harm may be, it is to be prevented from appearing in the first place. This is an obligation upon the Muslim society, Muslim family, Muslim individual, Muslim community. That if you know what is harmful for you, it hasn't appeared yet. So you have to do all that is possible to make sure that that specific harm does not befall you. All right? So if the harm has already appeared, then it becomes mandatory that you reduce that harm as much as possible. You try to extinguish that harm as much as possible. If it hasn't appeared, you do everything so it never appears. If by the qadr of Allah it has already appeared, then you must minimize that harm as much as possible without delay, before it gets worse and worse and worse. Right? The second point, the second ruling that comes from this, harm is to be removed or put an end to. So this is a follow-up now. Whenever harm exists, efforts has to be made to extinguish that harm. Like, for example, a person, it's his personal property. In front of his house, there's a public road that is, people are driving by, whatever may be the case. It's still his property by law. But he builds something on top of it that causes harm to the drivers passing by. By law, even though it's his property, because it's causing the drivers some problem. Maybe people are getting into accidents because of what he put up, right? Anything. Maybe super bright lights in front of his door, and at nighttime drivers get blinded and they start crashing into each other, right, for example. By law, this man has to remove this harm, right? Immediately, as quickly as possible. It's something, so whenever the harm exists, something simple like this, and of course use your imagination, even bigger harms, when it exists, it has to be diffused immediately in the quickest of manners. Number 3, harm is not to be removed by a similar harm. Harm is to be repelled. It's supposed to be extinguished. We understand this from the first 2 rules. But the third rule is, you cannot replace the harm by a similar harm. You don't replace evil with evil. All right? So for example, a starving person, he cannot take the food away from another starving person. He has removed the harm. Kids here, hey, what's your names? Hamza, and you're the brother of Hamza. Leave him be. All right, so let's say a starving person, he can't take the food away from another starving person. He removed the harm for himself, but now he has brought harm, a similar harm for somebody else. Right? What can happen is, hey man, we're both starving. We only have 1 sandwich left. Let's share it. Allah will put the barakah. But I'm starving, you're starving. I can't just snatch your food away and fill my stomach and let you die. Right? Harm cannot be removed by a similar harm. The 4th rule, a greater harm can be removed by a lesser harm. Right? This is where you'll find many scholars, they'll say when something comes up, both are evil. But as a Muslim, we're supposed to choose the lesser evil. Right? This is the principle from this hadith. A greater harm can be removed by a lesser harm. What's an example? Let's say the zakat that is being collected in the community is not enough to suffice all the needy people within that community. The government can implement certain new taxations to take more from the rich in order to suffice the needy. Right? The rich people might say, hey, you're harming us, why are you increasing taxes? The government's not taking it for his own pocket. The just Muslim ruler does this, and it has happened before, even during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu and others after him, those who were just. You already have. It's okay, we can take a little more from you and make sure all the poor people are taken care of. So the government has the right to take from people's wealth at that time in order to balance the economy of the area. So they remove a bigger harm, because if there's a bunch of poor people wandering around, this, that, the rich people are being greedy, this is not going to help the economy. So you remove that bigger harm with a lesser harm. Let some people be annoyed that they're being taxed extra. You can afford it, we'll take the tax, give it to the needy to balance the economy so that eventually, in a few years, the economy will rise on its own. Inshallah, if everybody has money to spend, they'll spend, right? In this principle, further it goes that, of course, when we have 2 evil options, we are supposed to choose the lesser of 2 evils. Like, for example, we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that it's even haram. When someone has died, the Prophet ﷺ warned those who wash bodies, warned those who carry the body to the burial, and so on, that do not even break a bone. This is haram. Right? Do not even, be very gentle in how you wash the deceased, how you carry the deceased to the janazah, to the burial site. Don't even break a bone. However, let's say a pregnant woman, she died, and it's medically, the doctors can clearly see that there is still chance that the baby can be kept alive. You choose the lesser of the 2 evils. You can open the womb of the deceased woman, take out the baby so that the baby can survive. Even though there's the hadith that you're not even allowed to touch and break a bone of the deceased. But here we're talking about another human being there who has the possibility to be saved. So you're allowed to choose the lesser of the two evils, and it is allowed Islamically that the doctors can cut the deceased woman and take the baby out and keep the baby alive bi'idnillah. Also, if there is a conflict between two evils, precedence should be given to the lesser evil. The number 5 rule that comes from this hadith, from this part, the presence of a particular harm is accepted to ward off a general harm. If there's already a harm existing, you accept it if it's going to ward off a general harm. Now, what does this mean? Again, let's give a present day example. The government can force the monopolies. If any companies have become monopoly over in society, our sellers are hoarding up the goods to sell at a maximum price because the demand will go up, supply will be limited, so therefore I can maximize profit, right? At that time again, the government has the right to enforce that these companies not do this. Let go of your goods, make less profit, but do not hold the community as hostage, right? So the presence of a particular harm is accepted to ward off the general bigger harm, right? Now, of course, the same thing. A few people want something. You can satisfy a few people, and you can dissatisfy hundreds. Islam says, focus on the hundreds, forget the few, right? This is one of those hadith, let's say when all these rebellions and all these things were happening in the past decade or so in many Muslim countries. Let's say a tyrant regime is killing 100 people. But if you rebel against him, he is going to go crazy and kill 1,000. Let the 100 suffer so that 1,000 can be saved. This is the principle in Sharia, right? That do not benefit just a few handful people and make the general mass suffer. It does not work. This is clear. There's not a madhab in the history of Ahlul Sunnah that said, make 2-3 people happy, make 20 people sad. Unless, of course, it's about halal and haram. That's different, right? Like, for example, we know alcohol is haram. 50 people are saying, let's vote and make alcohol halal. 2 people are saying, no, it has to remain haram. That's a different situation. Of course, we understand that. But this is in generality. That things that Sharia is quiet about, you don't focus on the benefit of just a few and make a bunch of other people suffer, right? So you don't do that. And 6, preventing evil takes precedence over bringing some benefit. There's a harm and there's a benefit. The priority is prevent the harm, then worry about the benefit. The greatest example is going back to alcohol itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentioned in the Quran, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. The people, they ask you regarding gambling and alcohol, or anything that intoxicates the mind. Right? They're asking you about gambling and intoxicants. قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ. Reply to them that in gambling and intoxicants there's a tremendous evil. There's a tremendous evil. And إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. There's a great evil and there is also some benefit. Allah is not denying that gambling has some benefit. Allah is not denying that intoxicants have some benefit. However, the evil outweighs the benefit. Right? And this is what Allah says. What with that? وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. The evil is far greater than the benefit that's found in gambling and intoxicants. So, this principle that preventing the evil takes precedence over bringing benefit. This is the rule in Islam. And then, of course, also the 7th rule, if there is a conflict between factors calling for something and factors prohibiting something, then the prohibition is to be taken precedence. Like just I said in the khutbah yesterday, the Prophet ﷺ said fasting just by Saturday itself is haram. we have this prohibition. Then you have Yawm al-Arafah will fall on a Saturday. This is a special day. We don't have any hadith that says you cannot fast Saturdays except for a special day. We don't have such evidence. So we take the prohibition into consideration first. We clearly have a prohibition, so we avoid fasting Saturday by itself. And that's what I was explaining yesterday. So you fast the day before. You want to fast Friday and Saturday, no problem. Fast Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Wednesday, all the days, no problem. But make sure you don't fast the Saturday by itself. Of course, you can't fast on Sunday because Sunday is the day of Eid. Right? So you do it the day before. You combine it this way. So if there's two factors, calling for a prohibition and calling for something, it is recommended that you fast Yawm al-Arafah. Right? This is the call. But then you have another factor prohibiting fasting on Saturday by itself. So you give precedence to what is forbidden first, to keep yourself safe from being accountable in the sight of Allah. Lastly, the 8th point, something harmful is not given precedence just because it was pre-existing. Right? Oh, it was already there, it's okay, let it be. Many people think this way. No. Right? Let's say, another simple example to understand this point. Let's say I have a house, a 2-story house, whatever may be the case. Next to me was open land, it got recently bought, and 6 months to a year later, the owner built a house too. And of course my house was already made. It was pre-existing. I have windows. Now the way my neighbor made his house, my windows look straight into his bedroom. I have to remove that window. I can't say, oh, hey, I built my house first, my windows were pre-existing. No, you're causing a harm now. You're clearly seeing his privacy. You have to cover it up or remove it. Something has to be done, right? So you can't say, well, this harm was already there, just let it be, not my problem, not my business, right? Pre-existing harm is not given precedence. I mean, harm is not given precedence just because it was pre-existing, right? Something was pre-existing. No, you remove it. Finally, before we go to Q&A, some exceptions to these rules. The implementation of the hudud is not part of this hadith. What do I mean by this? Someone commits zina, single male, single female. The law in Islam is the government is supposed to lash them. Male, female, doesn't matter. Of course it's going to bring them harm. No doubt it's going to cause them harm. We don't say, hey, la darara wa la dirar, so no punishment for that person. So it does not apply to hudud of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are capital punishment that Allah legislated in order to protect the society from corruption. Right? Let one or two people who have fallen into the crime, let them learn their lesson, and so that it shows to all of society what is a corrupt deed, and they also stay safe. Right? This is the benefit from it. So we have to understand that if a murderer is executed according to Islamic law, he's harmed, but hey, this hadith doesn't apply to him. The government or Allah established this rule to repel anyone else from ever thinking about murder. That somebody murders an innocent life, the government executes him, everybody hears about it, next time he's going to think twice. I better not kill anybody because I'm also going to lose my head. Right? It protects the society. And then, of course, the Islamic society should be such that no member tries to wrong another member. This is the ideal Islamic society. Because the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith in Sahih Muslim, narrated by Jabir ibn Abdullah, Al-Muslimu man salima al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. The Muslim is the one from whom other Muslims are safe from, his tongue and his hands. That's the definition of a Muslim. That other Muslims are safe from your tongue and your hands. So that's the ideal Islamic society. That as Muslims, we don't go around harming each other. And we don't go around harming other people. Even if they're not Muslim, we don't just go and start oh, he's a kafir, let me steal from him. Right? No, it doesn't work that way. Right? We have to respect all human beings. Don't cause them harm with your tongue or your hands. And just like someone is not allowed to cause harm to others, he is also forbidden from causing harm to himself. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said in one hadith, for example in Sahih al-Bukhari, فَإِنَّ لِجَسَدِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا. Indeed, your body has rights over you. You don't go consume bad things and kill your body. Look what happens to these alcoholics. They have kidney problems, liver problems, all sorts of problems, right? So don't consume food and drink that will kill your body, that will harm your body. Your body has rights over you. You can't be like, hey, I'm not harming anybody else. I'm just going to go kill myself. Suicide is one of the worst sins. And the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned that those who commit suicide will be in Jahannam, abadan, forever. And the way he killed himself, he'll be continuously doing that in Jahannam. So if someone stabbed himself to death, his whole life in Jahannam, he'll keep stabbing himself. Right? So this is also the other thing, that hey, the hadith says I can't cause harm to other people, so I'll go harm myself. No, self-inflicting self-harm is also haram. Your body has rights over you. You cannot harm your body. So, as I said, I wanted to keep this hadith. It has a lot of shari'i implications and fiqhi implications, but wanted to keep it as simple as possible so that we at least understand the main applications of this hadith in our lives, in our family life, in our communal lives, and so on and so forth. So I think dinner will be here in about 15, 20 minutes. So that's enough time. Usually the sisters, as usual, send your questions forward, and the brothers, of course, you raise your hand. Wa alaikum salam.
If a person A is spreading rumors and falsehoods and slander about person B outside the masjid and inside the masjid,
Yeah.
what are the options that B has or B's associates have?
Was the brothers, he's asking if somebody, just like we heard the hadith that a Muslim is the one from whose tongue and hands people are safe from. So let's suppose person A is slandering person B. Whether inside the masjid, outside the masjid, doesn't matter. Right? So person A is slandering. Slandering means lying. Right? Namima, buhtan. That somebody's spreading lies, malicious gossip, whatever may be the case. Person B, of course, first of all, anyone who hears that, there's three parties involved. Person A, of course, it's fard on him not to do this to begin with. No one should be lying or slandering anybody, right? That's haram on him. Then the listeners, it is fard on them to verify the information, right? Any type of information regarding other people, we have been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to verify information so that bigger problems do not arise in our lives. That's the listeners. Then, of course, you have person B, who is the one being harmed. Person B has the option, of course, he can bear with it patiently, make dua to Allah. Then also he has the option to clarify the misunderstandings. If you have heard such and such, please come and talk to me. What's the proof? The Prophet ﷺ did this in his own life. When the munafiqun were lying about his wife, Aisha radiallahu anha, he got up on the minbar. Who will help me against the slander of my wife? Not only did he want to clarify, he was asking for help. That my family is being slandered. Who will help me clarify this misunderstanding? So from his own life, he was being patient and waiting for Allah. Right? But then, we're all human beings. It got to a point that you could not remain quiet anymore. So he got up, stood on the minbar, and he made a public call that my wife is being slandered. Who is going to help me bring justice? Right? We all know the story. Let me read one question from you. Does punishment of the grave exist? If you can give us references. There's numerous, dozens of hadith in Bukhari and Muslim and others in which the Prophet ﷺ vividly described the details of what happens after someone is buried, how Munkar and Nakir, the two angels, they come and ask their three questions. Based on the answers, that person will be put to ease, or he'll be punished, right? And then there's a lengthy hadith in Bukhari that also mentions, like for example, in that hadith it mentions those who were guilty of riba, dealing with riba, they'll be swimming in a river of blood. Those who were guilty of zina, they will be burning in an oven, so on and so forth. So specific sins have specific punishments in the grave, in the life of the barzakh. So there's dozens of hadith that give this information. So of course these are the references, and we have to believe it. This is our aqidah, right? This is from the pillars of iman, that you believe in the afterlife. Afterlife starts from the barzakh, the moment you have passed away. There's the life in the barzakh, then the judgment on the day of judgment, and then of course Jannah and Jahannam. These are all part of the belief in afterlife. Why is sleeping on your stomach forbidden? This is a specific hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, that people will be made to lay down at certain times in Jahannam, and they will be laying down on their stomachs. Therefore, don't sleep in that way, because this is the manner of the people in Jahannam. They will be laying on their stomachs as they're being punished. Can we sleep on our backs or only on our sides? You can sleep on your backs if you're moving around, but the absolute best way is to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, which is to turn to your right. And you might think babies sleep like this. No, this is how our Prophet ﷺ used to sleep. He would put his hand under his cheek, his right cheek. He would turn to the right and sleep facing the right side. This is the best way to sleep. But if you're twisting and turning in your sleep, that's different, right? But don't go to sleep laying on your stomach. That is not something that you should do. Okay, so now
One hand or two hands?
Huh?
One hand or two hands?
No, it would be like if you, maybe we'll do this in the Wednesday class more, right? But it's something like you can do this or even with one hand, no problem, inshallah. All right, you had to, okay.
I have a question with the continuation of Brother Rahid.
Yeah,
He asked in general A, B, and C.
yeah.
Let me ask specifically about A, B,
If
and
the
C.
kids can just, inshallah, yeah,
There's a big rumor,
yeah,
I'm not going to name about A, but B is you yourself,
okay,
and C are the community. And maybe people know or don't know, particularly about you. People say that you don't come, you are an employee of MCOJ, but you don't attend. It's your obligation and duty that you don't attend the Fajr Salah.
yeah.
So, can you describe about your contract and how people making rumor about you and against you?
No, this is of course, things like that shouldn't happen.
What's the question?
The brother is saying that apparently there's a rumor going around about me in the community, that I'm not fulfilling my duties, I don't come for Fajr, this, that, so on and so forth, right? This is something that, subhanAllah, it was made very clear. And it's not just this time. Let's say, because I want to make sure everybody understands this clearly.
Please.
Even when Sheikh Kamal left, the administration of this place asked me, would you be the imam here? I said, I have family commitments, I cannot give just time. I refused, right? And this time, in October 2017, we sat here in EHT, right? I said the same thing. Every community has different needs. I can do this, that. I got some family commitments. I'm going to have to go into Philadelphia often. This, that. I can't come for this specific period. If you guys agree, no problem. If you don't agree, I will still come as a visitor like I have been doing for 12 whole years. No problem. So why did they agree? Simple question. I'm not violating anything. I clearly verbalized. I have certain family commitments. So I will be missing from this, right? It was made clear. And not only that, it was also announced by the management last year in my first month. And I also announced it in my first month. Multiple times for Salat al-Maghrib, at Fajr itself, at Salat al-Isha. It was announced with the microphone multiple times by me and that management of that time. Why is it a problem now after 1.5 years?
So is this a clear example of dara and dara?
Yes, of course. And especially about the one who teaches you the religion, this is even worse. How can you lie about the one who teaches you the religion? Especially if he has not caused you any harm.
So
Right?
how to kill this rumor?
Hopefully whoever heard, if you hear something, say it. And this video is going to be there anyways on Facebook, so whoever wants to listen to it can listen to it. Is it halal to donate your organs after death? No, this goes back to that hadith, that after somebody passes away, we're not allowed to break even their bones or anything like that, right? So you do not donate your organs after death. While you're alive, we got 2 kidneys, we got 2 livers. Someone is in dire need in your family, in your community, your blood groups match, everything matches. If you want to donate a kidney to that brother, to that sister so they can live, you have the right to do that. Because you're alive, you made that choice to save somebody's life for the sake of Allah. You'll get a reward. But once we are dead, our body does not belong to us. It belongs to Allah, right? So we're not allowed to do that, right?
But let me,
Yeah.
being a medical person, when someone donates an organ,
Yeah.
the donation is before death. Once the person dies, even in here, they don't take part. Just before they pronounce dead, just before they pronounce dead, they retrieve all the organs which you wish to be donated.
Repeat that part.
Okay. Once the person is dead, all the organs are useless. So when the organs are donated, it is just before person is announced dead, they retrieve the organs and then take all the live everything out. So it is not true that they retrieve organs after death.
Yeah.
They try to retrieve just before the person is expired.
Okay, if the person is still alive and he gives consent, that would fall under the rule of
Yes.
being alive and doing it. But the thing is that after death, you can't do that. Okay, why did the Sahaba, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, go to war to spread Islam when there is no compulsion in religion? This is actually not true. So we would have to, hey kids in the front. Usually kids sit in the back to make trouble, right? They don't sit in the front and make the trouble. All right. So don't do that in school now. The Imam gave us permission to sit in the back in class and make trouble. All right. So these type of stories come from these Orientalists writing about Islamic history, or non-Muslim bigots who write about Islamic history. You would actually have to read the history of Islam by the Muslim scholars themselves, right? So then you would be clarified about these situations. The companions of the Prophet ﷺ never went to any land, plundered, looted, annihilated. They did none of that, right? If that was the case, let's say they made wars to spread Islam. If that was the case, there would still not be Jews in Yemen. There would still not be Christians in Egypt. There would still not be Christians in Palestine, right? There's a bunch of Christians in Palestine to this day who are also being oppressed by Israel, right? But they don't say that in the media. Right? They keep make it seem like as if all Palestinians are Muslims who are suffering. So if Islam was spread by the sword, this is a simple, logical question. Why do we still have Jews and Christians in Arabia? Right? This is not the case. And they can trace their ancestors to the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Those Christian tribes, Jewish tribes have existed since then, and they're still living, right? So this is absolute false accusations that the non-Muslims make against Islam and Muslims. What was the dua that you mentioned yesterday of Jumu'ah? For Yawmul Arafah, the Prophet ﷺ said that the best dua is to say La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk wa lahul hamd wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. This is the best dua that you can make during Yawm al-Arafah. As far as these days of Dhul Hijjah, you increase in your tahleel, which is La ilaha illallah, in your takbir, which is Allahu Akbar, and tahmeed, which is Alhamdulillah. So, you know the takbir of Eid, we can say it in an unrestricted number of times throughout these 10 days. That Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, walillahi alhamd. You can say this throughout these 10 days, unrestricted, as many times as you want, whenever you want. The more you say it, the better for you, inshallah.
I'm sorry, I have question.
Yeah, we haven't seen you in like a couple of months, so
Yes.
you were storing up.
One more thing, and it is disturbing, and I need to learn for myself. I mean, we would like to follow the sunnah of Hazrat Umar that the Khalifa or Imam can be questioned, and he listened without an eyebrow raised up, or he answered. I hope that you don't mind if I ask questions which is directly related to you. There is a special group of people in our community that's constantly talking about, and the second thing that they talk about, the first one was that you don't come. Second, what interest do you have to put Brother Sohail as a Jummah Imam? How does he qualify for that? There's a question running around.
Well, the brother's asking, why do I sometimes appoint Brother Sohail to give khutbah? Me being the Imam of MCOSJ, I'm in charge of making the religious decisions, right? So I don't see who else here can give a better khutbah in the absence of me, because I can't be at two places at the same time every week, right? That's common sense. Secondly, let's say Sheikh Naeem used to come sometimes, but he made it very clear he's a little busy for a few months. Some other people might be busy, this, that. So from the local community, you know, he studied a little bit. He knows his Arabic is good, and so on and so forth. So I used my, you know, religious judgment here. That unless there's somebody else, like let's say even last week I heard the brother Mu'adh, he just graduated from Medina University. I asked him directly when I saw him at Dhuhr, hey brother, if you're free for Jummah, if you're going to stay here, sometimes I need some help because we have two locations. So I'm always asking, right? Actual Tullabul Ilm, but if they're not always available, I have to get the best one that I think is most qualified, you know, and again, this is my religious decision, you know, so I have the right to do that, inshallah. Yeah. What Sahabi recorded the hadith? It's Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. Yeah, he got it. He's asking, is it allowed to send the dead body overseas? No, this is something that we should not do. Because when you, if the kids in the back can just quiet. When you send a dead body overseas, the embalming process, this is a hideous process. Right? They have to cut up, take the organs out, put chemicals in, preserve the body, and then they send it. This is absolutely haram. Right? And Allah has even mentioned in the Quran, part of ilmul ghaib is fi ayyi ardin tamut. Which land you're going to die, none of you know, but only Allah knows. Right? So Allah already told us this. You might be from Pakistan, you died in America. Qadar Allah, get buried in America. This is what Allah wrote for you. We don't make that decision, right? So don't transfer your relative, deceased relative overseas, because that is a hideous process. Hideous process. Don't do this. Cut the person up, take out the organs, stuff chemicals in to preserve. This is dhulm on the body. It is by the will of Allah that he died in a different place other than where his birthland is. There's another hadith, by the way, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, and this is a Hasan hadith at best. The space between your birthland and your deathland is the space that Allah will grant you in paradise. So this is the good news, right? So if you were born in Pakistan, died in America, that's a big space. So rejoice. right? Rejoice. So whatever Allah has written for you, be happy about it. Don't worry. So make it a will. Make sure, especially there are revert brothers and sisters, or whatever may be the case. Maybe you know the rules of the religion, but your family doesn't. Make it in your will. After I die, do not transport my body. Bury me here. Right? Make that in the will, so this way, inshallah, no one can. Because it happens, like last year, alhamdulillah, me and the brothers, we were able to stop this one family from sending their body to Bangladesh. It took me like 2 whole days to convince them that this is a sin. Don't do this to your mother. Right? But if the woman had written a will, it would have been much easier. That, hey, this is your mother's own dying wish. Fulfill it. Right? So be smart, inshallah. Write that in your will, so your relatives don't do anything wrong after you.
The other part of this question could be that if someone dies in Pakistan and the son and daughters are here,
they get buried there.
No.
Yeah.
They want to go and visit.
Yeah.
Is it allowed to keep the dead body in a freezer for 2-3
No, the
days?
sunnah is you bury as soon as possible. There were situations like, let's say, the lady who used to clean the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She died in the middle of the night. The Sahaba quickly washed her, buried her, and everything was done. And the next day, where is she? And then he was informed that she had died. We didn't want to bother your sleep. We already washed and took care of it. And he was very angry that this woman used to clean my masjid. Why did you not wake me up? And he went to the graveyard and offered another Salatul Janazah out of respect for what she used to do. Right? So that's also proof that he didn't say you should have held the body. He said, wake me up. But that's even if somebody dies at night, if it's doable. I know, of course, in Western countries, it's not always like in Muslim countries. There are some formalities, paperwork, this, that. It takes almost a day in most places, right? So that's something beyond our control. But the point is, you are supposed to bury the person as soon as possible. Right? This is what is best. Is suicide one of the major sins? Yes. The hadith, this is a hadith Qudsi and Sahih al-Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah said, Badarani abdi, the one who kills himself, he has brought himself to me before his appointed time. Haramtu alayhi al-jannah. I have made Jannah haram for him. Right? So this is definitely one of the worst sins that someone can commit.
You mentioned that Sahabi was fighting furiously in one of the battles, and people will say, what a Sahaba is, we definitely will go to Jannah, and say, or maybe some other place.
Yeah, this is the hadith I had mentioned in the khutbah a couple of weeks ago, that one of the people in one of the battles, he was fighting furiously, big, bright, brave warrior. He was fighting away left and right, and many of the companions thought, for sure he's from Ahlul Jannah. Look at the way he's defending the Prophet. He's fighting for Islam, so on and so forth. But the Prophet ﷺ said, or he's going to go to some other place. He said this 3 times. So then one of the younger companions, it was either Abdullah ibn Umar or Amr ibn al-As, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, who followed him and then saw at nighttime the man was wounded. He couldn't bear the pain, so he took the spear and he killed himself. And then he realized, now I know what the Prophet ﷺ meant. He knew that he's going to go to Jahannam. Even though he did such a nice deed, but he ended it in a horrible way. Allah didn't accept it. And he ended up being from the losers. Yeah.
Just to add on to the suicide question, you said that, I believe you said you provide counseling for people with depression.
Yeah, of course. This is something that I used to do for a long time and still do. Alhamdulillah,
Is there any general advice you can give to somebody with depression?
No, depression, of course, the first thing is, it depends on what's been going on, right? Qadr, if someone's been molested, and there are people like that in our own community here, that, alhamdulillah, I deal with, right? Every community has these things, comes as a shock, but no, they're here. They just feel shy to have shown up before. But whatever the case, maybe someone is an abused spouse, someone faced this, someone faced that. Different people go through different kinds of depression. You would have to find out what's going on. Maybe a child who grew up in an abusive home where the father and mother are constantly beating each other up. His depression will be a different kind. His fear will be a different kind. So you would first have to sit, find out what the whole situation is, and then figure out, make a plan and how to talk with that person. That's step one. Step two, connecting with the Quran, connecting with the adhkar of the Prophet ﷺ, right? No one can relieve your pain except Allah. That is what many people don't understand. Of course, you will have to, sometimes if it reaches the point that you have to take medication, you take it. You don't go cold turkey and then think, I'm going to start reciting Quran. No, once you go cold turkey from those type of medication, you will harm yourself drastically. So you have to talk with your doctor for that medication part. How can I slowly wean myself off while I take the Islamic route, right? So this would be the way. There are many du'as that the Prophet ﷺ taught, that if you say this, Allah will relieve you from your depression. So you would have to memorize those, say those certain prayers and things like that.
Is there anything specific in the Quran that's mentioned with the
Yeah, specific. Like one example is the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the best thing, one of the best things that you can say to relieve distress is the dua of my brother Yunus alayhi salam, that La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min adh-dhalimin. This is one of the best du'as that you can say, and you repeat it as many times as you want throughout the day. That there is no deity worthy of worship except you, glory be to you, indeed I have been from the wrongdoers. So this is one of the best. Another dua the Prophet ﷺ taught, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum bi rahmatika astaghith. O Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum, the self-sustaining, these are the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that in your mercy I seek refuge, right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, this is another dua that will help relieve your stress and your burden. What was the question? I think I got the same question here. Okay, all right, listen. What happens if you're on a boat and you die? Where would you be buried? If you're by yourself, hopefully the shark don't eat you, right? No, but if there are people there, if the shore is very nearby, that's a different story. Otherwise, you can, if it's days away, you would offer the janazah and dump the body in the water. Okay, last question here. What is the example of an Islamic husband? What are the characteristics of an Islamic husband? Wait for, inshallah, 2 weeks. I mean, no more Saturday lectures after tonight, because next Saturday is Yawm al-Arafah. People are going to be fasting and so on and so forth. And the following Saturday, maybe people are still coming back from the 4-day Eid, whatever may be the case. But after that, inshallah, we'll have the workshop. I'll make sure we make the flyers advertised. So in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, we'll have a workshop about the rights of the husband and the wife. So wait, inshallah ta'ala. If you've been patient with your husband for the past few years, be patient a little bit more for a couple of weeks. Right? So learn about that, inshallah ta'ala. Oh yeah, brother, go ahead. What is it?
Workshop different from the lecture.
No, it's going to be the lecture. We'll cover all the points. We'll break every now and then. It might take like about 3 hours. So we'll plan out the logistics, inshallah ta'ala. We'll let you guys know, inshallah. All right, so that can be later, inshallah.
Imam.
Yes.
It is just my personal question, and then Shura, are you planning or thought about it, or inviting previous Imam in this community for any lecture or anything?
I don't have any contact with them, so
What's the question?
Because I have a rumor that he has been contacted or something, that previous Imam has been contacted and invited for lecture from the platform of MCOJ.
not to my knowledge, it wasn't me. Yeah, and not any of them. So I wouldn't know. Yeah, this is something I'm hearing for the first time. Yeah. All right, inshallah. No more questions. Sure. So let's eat dinner and then we'll pray, inshallah.